Welcome to our museum. I'm here to guide you through a series of exhibits entitled Alternative Payment Models. Today you will be viewing an interpretive art installation, and as such I will be explaining each exhibit as we go by. Also, please, no flash photography for the enjoyment of the rest of our patrons. As we make our way to our first exhibit, let's talk about alternative payment models quick. These came into play as a way of combating growing healthcare costs in this country. Our first exhibit, entitled Money, 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 represents these growing healthcare costs. Let's explore this concept further. At this point, you're probably thinking, that was a stunning exhibit, but what does 20% mean? 20% refers to what percentage of the gross domestic product the United States will likely be spending on healthcare costs by the year 2022. This is in comparison to most European nations that spend roughly 11% of their GDP. This leads us right to our second exhibit, entitled A Hefty Cost. You see, the reason healthcare expenditures are growing so rapidly in the United States are due to technology, prescription drugs, and chronic diseases. Our next exhibit is entitled Rooted in CMS. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid have been the inspiration for alternative payment models in a commercial field. You see, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid have been using these models for years now. Our next exhibit, entitled ACOs Bundled in P4P, shows us some examples of alternative payment models. Let's look at each of these alternative payment models in more detail. ACOs are accountable care organizations, which are networks of providers that share responsibility for coordinating care for their patients. The roots for ACOs can be traced back to the Medicare Shared Savings Program. Another alternative payment model is that of bundled payments. These give providers a set payment for all services a patient receives over a set period of time. The goal of these are to improve care coordination, limit costly and unnecessary services, and reduce variations in care. A final alternative payment model is P4P, or Pay for Performance. In this model, providers are reimbursed based on whether they achieve a predetermined set of quality measures. This model aims to improve the quality, efficiency, and overall value of healthcare. Our next exhibit is entitled Scream versus Calm. This exhibit symbolizes the artist's feelings on fee-for-service billing versus alternative payment model billing. Let's explore this further. First, let's review the fee-for-service billing cycle. A patient contacts a provider. The provider contacts the patient's insurance company to see if pre-authorization is needed. After the appointment, a medical coder identifies all services. The healthcare provider creates an insurance claim using these codes. A claims processor who works for the insurance company either accepts or rejects the claim. The healthcare provider then bills the patient for any remaining balance. Now let's compare this to the bundled payment billing cycle. A provider is given a set amount per episode of care per patient. The provider coordinates the patient's care amongst any additional health providers. One bill is generated that includes all services, and then the provider keeps any extra money above the billed amount. And that concludes our tour. We hope you enjoyed the exhibits and learned a thing or two about alternative payment models.